DeShone Kizer, man. Welcome to the Intangible podcast. So excited to have you here. It's been fun watching you over your career, but also really that transition out of sports where I really started to get to know you. It's been, I'm sure, some ups and downs.
Absolutely.
But I see you, and when I see you, there's always a smile on your face, and there's always a fight in you. So excited to have you, man.
Yeah, excited to be here. I'm glad I was able to make it happen.
You know, a little bit of a story before we jump into your career is how we met, you know.
Yeah.
Again, everybody, you know, a lot of people probably think that we all know each other. We play in the league, but we don't. But being here in Nashville has made it really easy. And being in a lot of different circles, and you know, the circle we were able to really connect on was at the Entrepreneur Center.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so starting that journey, you walk in, I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, I know that guy. And for me, it was a relief to see another athlete in a class like that. And so anything come to mind for you when we first started that whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the for me, deciding to stay in Nashville is probably a longer conversation to dive into, but I knew that it was a place that was growing. I knew it was a place that I can call home, have values that obviously align with my values. And I knew that, as I transitioned out of ball and had a business in mind that I was going to get it and go run, that if I was going to be in Nashville, the last thing I wanted to do is treat it like this, COVID lockdown location where, I just do all my work at home and then maybe I go travel to do business. So, I was exploring for the community, trying to figure out where I might be able to fit in and find some other people thinking the right way. Found the entrepreneurship center here in town through a couple of my fiance's friends, and walked into that first class. And once again, I was like, look, I met a guy who was, starting a boxing gym, met a guy a lady who was, in the esthetician space. It's like, man, I hope I can, find someone who's kind of moving the same way I'm moving, thinking about something bigger. And then obviously it was dope to run into you, knowing that, there's another guy in a similar path to me who's, also reaching out for community, but also, humble enough to try to learn. While that program that we're in, I ended up doing it for a couple months, and ended up taking some other paths to build my community. That was an awesome moment, as at the start of my Nashville journey.
Yeah, no, it was great, and I learned a lot, man. You don't realize what you don't know until you get in, and I have been in it now. I have been in it for 3 years, and then you get into a course like this, and you're like, man, there's still a lot to learn about this process of being an entrepreneur. And so it was fun for me, and I'm glad I got a chance to meet you through that. So we're going to dive in, man. We're going to dive into just, take us through growing up in Toledo, Ohio. I mean, it's not Hollywood, it's not ESPN, but, it's your home. It's where you planted your roots, and you grew up around faith. You grew up around discipline. Take us through a little bit of your early on journey and success.
Yeah. So Toledo is what I like to say is the most average American city, in the sense that there's a lot of things that are a lot bigger. There's places where you might get a southern draw. There's places where you might be a little more chill next to the beach. I'm saying in other locations.
Okay.
If you're going throughout the U.S., you might get a southern draw in the south. You might get fast paced in the East Coast. You might get West Coast. Chill. Toledo's this little pocket below Detroit that is just average, just a bunch of just normal people. I like to think that, there's not anything that's too crazy special about it. But what it lends itself to is that the fight to get out of Toledo typically has had some success with guys like Jimmy Jackson, a lot of boxers, Robert Easter Jr. There's just a big group of about 6 or 7 of us that have taken the roots that are given to us in Toledo and turn it into a lot of success. And I think a lot of that has to do with really for us is the idea of getting out. There's a lot of other places where if you're growing up in a bigger city, your goal is to be the best in the city. It's about, trying to, grow within the community. And if you end up on top of the community, that means that you probably are on top of the world. If you're in Manhattan and you win Tribeca, there's a good chance that you're, top 3 in the entire world.
Right.
For us, you fight and you grind from your junior high and high school years to try to get some sort of national exposure. And then, through AAU programs, through, traveling for sports, you're able to go out and kind of get a taste of what the rest of the world looks like. And then, for most of us who've been able to kind of take that next step, you start to realize that, the goal is to use the values that comes from the ground and the mission that Toledo kind of provides you, and use that as your foundation to try to go separate yourself from the rest of the world.
Yeah, but you said average. You're not. I mean, average in a place that you really stuck out. So as you start to really, figure out what that journey was like for you, were you a 2-sport athlete? Was there basketball, baseball, or was it football? What sports did you really? What was your first love of sport? I guess it would be a good question.
Yeah. I grew up basketball. My dad played basketball at Bowling Green.
Okay.
So he was all hoop. He went and played professionally overseas in France for a little while until. My parents had me. And so when he came back, he was giving up his dream to be a professional athlete, and wanted to kind of take all that energy and put it into me. So the first thing he did was handing me a basketball, and a lot of my earliest memories with him are going over to the YMCA for pickup basketball. A lot of people back home know me as DK2, because when you go on the pickup basketball sign-up sheet at the West Toledo Y, my dad was DK and I was DK2. So basketball was definitely my love. Anytime I'm back home, I was just back home last week. I'm getting inducted to my high school Hall of Fame and got to share some memories.
Congratulations, bro. That's awesome.
Appreciate it. Yeah. I got to spend some time with my pops, and a lot of the conversation when we're sitting at home always comes back to basketball. There's always some sort of basketball on. So that was my first love. From there, started to hang out, moved from elementary school to a new elementary school, and all the guys were playing football the next season. And thought that football could be a nice, way for me to, expand outside of basketball. I was as nervous as can be. I played point guard. I was kind of the coach on the court, I guess, at an early age, and I did not like physical contact. So I was not
like a true quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. So I did not want to go get tackled. But what that led me into is, being a quarterback, because if I can get the ball in my hand and try to get around some of the guys hitting me, then I knew that, I didn't have to do the tackling drills like everyone else.
What age was this at?
This is like second and third grade. So I'm like,
right.
Still early. This is like 10, 11, 12 years old. And what we realized pretty quickly was that, I could throw the ball. I was throwing the ball, 40, 50 yards, early on. And while I didn't get the starting job right away in elementary with the coach's kid being the quarterback, which is your typical story.
Typical story.
With that, by my 7th and 8th grade year, moving over to the heavier weight league, I started to become, kind of a name around town. I was like, wow, this kid can be, a guy who can, potentially play, varsity football as a freshman. And I was 6 foot, around 6 foot, 5'11" as an 8th grader, and could throw the ball, at the highest level at that time. And then obviously I was a hooper, so everyone knew I was kind of an athlete. But throughout all of that, the sport that I actually enjoyed playing the most was baseball, because my dad was my basketball coach. So that was 7 a.m. mornings. That was, nitpicky of everything I could possibly be doing better. Football was this sport where it's like, look, to be honest, I didn't want to get hit, so I didn't want to be there at training camp or running Indian drills around the field. It was just this super aggressive thing that I knew was making me better and I knew I was good at, but the grind for it at the time was tough. Then I would go play baseball, and practice would be sunflower seeds in my back pocket, country music, super chill, free.
Yeah.
My dad doesn't know anything about it. So he's just there,
he can't critique you.
He can't critique me. So I enjoyed playing that the most. And that was where, a lot of my best friends were. But ultimately I think that, playing all 3 sports and excelling in all 3 sports, ended up, being a 2-year varsity letterman in baseball, had a great career, batted clean up there, went on to be a 4-year varsity letter in basketball, started in a state Final Four game as a freshman as the point guard in the basketball team. And then, got pulled up to varsity in football as my freshman year for the last few games. But for the most part, that career was, from sophomore year on. I test a lot of my success that I had, on the field, ultimately at the college level and then at the NFL level to playing all those sports,
right?
Because there's lessons in every last one of them.
Well, I mean, first before I even go there, I'm gonna say I give quarterbacks a hard time, but I will tell you, I remember the first time I went out to play football and we had to do an Oklahoma drill. The first time I ever even had contact. So I didn't even know, even think about, oh, I don't want to get hit. It was, let's get some Oklahoma drill. And I went up with a guy named, grew up with a guy named Jarvis Mack. This guy can bring it thunder. He played fullback, but man, he can hit. And he was the first guy that I went up against. And we had a major stalemate. My ear pads popped out. It was like the old school helmets. And I remember I questioned it. I'm like, man, I don't know if I really want to do this. So I think we all go through that first transition into football. That just like, I don't know if I want contact or not. And then you get hit, and it's like, you question that, but then you don't want to look like the kid that's just gonna walk away. And so you kind of get a couple of reps under your belt, and then it kind of settles down. And so it did for me.
Exactly.
But I would say you talked about this freedom that you had, not having someone critiquing you. How did you carry that back into football, where now you're playing quarterback and you're the guy, and you had this pressure of playing basketball with your dad, but then, football was kind of like this, I'm not sure. I'm sure that baseball relaxed feeling that you learned was able to transition. How did you bring that into the sport? And did you bring it into sport using baseball?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the strategy that came from baseball of, toying with the pitcher, and we're in the last inning of the game, and I end up being out on second base, and there's baseball is, for most people who are watching who don't really love the sport, call it a boring sport, but every pitch, every at bat, every lead off is a different opportunity with a different strategy, a different mindset. You might get a little extra step, you might from second base leading off, you might go a little deeper backwards to try to get yourself a little head start to be able to round the corner on third. All of that strategy of thinking that through and spending time with some great, grade school and then high school coaches thinking about the game that way. Those are most of the lessons that I was able to bring over to football. And an interesting thing about football is that maybe we were a little behind at Central Catholic, the high school I went to, but I was kind of this interesting last generation of people still having a lot of respect for pro style football, getting under center, being able to run the ball. There was still maybe a 50-50 split out there of people who thought that this whole, spread game, being in the gun every play, zone read, RPO stuff, like there's still a lot of people who were saying that was just gimmicky and that it wouldn't stick. But for me being a more athletic, 6 foot at the time, going into my freshman year quarterback, and you're going to try to try this spread offense. What that allowed me to do is, once again, play a little more free and use a little more of that strategy and really take on a lot more ownership of what the game outcome was going to be from my position. Most people who are playing at the 8th grade, at least at the time, at the 8th grade freshman level, you're handing the ball off to a good running back, and that's pretty much the main part of the game. Maybe you get to throw a slant on third down, or you maybe do a play action play every once in a while just to keep the defense, on their heels.
How'd you know my high school playbook?
It was everyone. That's how the game was. That's how the game was. But what how that kind of all translated together is that as the coaches were starting to use me thinking about this new spread offense that was coming out, is that for me it allowed me to once again take a lot more ownership on the outcome of the game from my position. Like I didn't grow up pointing at guys saying like, hey, you didn't make a block and I got sacked, or in the run game, hey, we ran the ball too much this game, and we end up losing. Because once you're in the gun and you got the ability to pull the ball on a zone read every once in a while, like I got enough opportunity with the ball in my hand for me to make a real impact on the game. So I think that ultimately, how that all kind of comes together is that by the time I was kind of using the confidence and strategy that was coming from basketball as a point guard, the strategy that I was thinking about in football, and kind of expanding how I was looking at the game as coaches were trying new things with me as a quarterback, I was able to really, have confidence that I was going to make a bigger impact on the outcome of the game.
Yeah. And so were you highly sought out in baseball, basketball, or football?
I mean, baseball, not as much. I shut down my arm right away because my freshman, I got an offer after I played freshman football as a freshman. That was a rule at my high school, and I got an offer from Syracuse, my first ever offer after that freshman year of football. Once again, I was probably 6'1", 6'2", and had a decent career, or had a decent film that I put on tape. So like once we knew that was happening, it was like, all right, this is gonna be the thing,
path.
Right? Yeah. There's a lot of people out there who can. Let's call it what it is. There's a lot of, 6 foot who should be about 6'4" basketball players who, can play at the highest level. In baseball, there's only, 50% of the guys who are out on the field have real scholarships. And if that, they're probably partial. Football, there's not a lot of guys out there who, at the time, once again, the spread offense is coming in, who are going to be, 6'4", athletic, can make every throw out there. We're playing multiple sports. So, as a family, we knew that was going to be the path that we were going to head down. I ended up having, some offers in basketball. I could have played mid-major, the local MAC schools being up in Northwest Ohio. But, right after my freshman season, the floodgates open. Yeah, we're going to go do this football thing.
Yeah. So now you in average Toledo, Ohio, in your words, and you're the man. Yeah. As you start to really build that confidence as a starting quarterback, good looking kid, everybody knows your name. How did you handle that stress and that pressure now that it's all focused on this one sport? Did your ego step in, or were you able to manage it all? Or was your dad just heavy handed on you?
Yeah, I will say that my parents were a big part of it. Like, hindsight 2020, and I just had the moment to really reflect on all of this. Once again, being back home for my Hall of Fame induction last week for my high school, and the moment, I never really felt that moment. Like I never really felt that like I was the man. Like there was definitely moments, and there was definitely, every post game interview after a game, I was obviously the guy who got selected to go and be on camera. So that means I'm on television. That means my face is around a little bit more. But my family, and the way that we looked at my career was always looking, 2 to 3 steps ahead. Yeah. And then, the message that I hear over and over and over from my dad is you never know who's watching. Mm-hmm. Like that's, there's a lot of, different lessons, but that's the one that like always is stuck as the number one thing that he said. And you never know who's watching is kind of a testament to, if you want to be doing something bigger, right? If you want to play college sports at the highest level, if you want to get the best education, if you want to potentially play professional sports, there's someone who's out in front of you who's probably going to be evaluating your every step right now. So through a lot of the early success that I had across basketball, football, and baseball, but obviously mostly in football as I started getting offers, I took every opportunity meeting with, a rich alumni from, my high school, or, going and doing an interview with the local news station, or, meeting with the coach who was coming in to do a little bit of evaluation on me as a job interview. Like it was never about me. It was about, the team and the success that the team was having. It was about the opportunity that was in front of me that I was trying to, get to. So, as you go back and you may be asking people back home, about who I was, like I was a guy who was probably, not having as much fun as I probably should have been having at the time, because I was so, trying to be so buttoned up, because I had this mentality of like, look, I just want to get the best college education I can possibly get off of this. That was ingrained in me from an early age. I've shared the story a little bit. My dad in 5th grade, he was my AAU coach. He wanted, my AAU team was actually about an hour and 15 minutes away. They actually held practices. A lot of the top AAU programs didn't, but we had to have practices. So I would have to go down there after school. My dad was a cop, so he would pick me up in his police car. So I remember he picked me up in 5th grade, and I'm sitting in the back of the police car, and he was taking me home. And I just did not want to go down to this practice, because the Team Lima Panthers is what they were called. It was all defense. Like these guys were all like hustlers down there. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to get in this car, drive an hour and 15, practice defense all day, then hop back in the car and drive back. So I'm complaining and I'm whining in the back seat. And we got home, and my dad told me, it's like, son, you got 2 options. I don't have any money for you for college. You're either going to the military, or you're getting a college scholarship for playing sports. You can make that decision right now, and that's completely up to you. Either way, I'll support you completely. but you're going to make a decision. And I knew I didn't want to go to the military. So I knew I was choosing sports. So my entire career throughout all of this, we had that vision in mind together that like every decision that we're going to make, every move, every, social event, whether it's prom or whether it's, playing in baseball, like it was all towards a mission of, trying to get the best college scholarship I could possibly get.
You know what I struggle with is that's, different path. I grew up farm kid, Mississippi, worked my way through. And my goal was, I wasn't thinking about football. Same thing. I was thinking about how do I get a good education, get a good job so I can take care of my family, and not thinking about football being that thing. It just kind of fell into my lap around being the size I was, and then having good athletic ability that I was blessed with. But now when I sit back and I look at it, like you had this hardship and your dad like laid it out for you plain as day. Either go to the military, you're going to get a scholarship because I can't pay for your school. And I think about my kids now. We live in the bubble, they don't have those kind of hardships. And again, everyone has their own different type of hardships. That's how we grow as people. But it's different for our kids now. They don't have, it's not that real hardship of not having or not being able to afford something. And so I think about that all the time with my kids of how do you get them to think about, life this way? And goals this way so that they can achieve them. And so it's one of those, I'm constantly talking to people, trying to learn how to continue to build my kids up in a way that I want them to go, so that, they don't rest back and say, oh, well, it's going to be taken care of for me, And so, which means there's a lot of hard conversations with my kids, like from a consequence standpoint, to try to do that, but it's good to hear that, from you grew up with your parents in two parents in a household, I didn't. So again, different path, but still that same kind of foundation of having to, hey, this is what it is. This is how you're going to get out. This is how you're going to pay for a future for yourself. And it's on you to make that decision. No one else's choice.
100%. 100%. So when was that time where when football became the career versus the path towards, a type of education? Was it college? Was it high school? When did you actually start thinking like, oh, wait, I might actually be able to make some money, doing this?
When I was drafted.
Really? All the way until then?
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Yeah. When I was drafted.
Wow.
I told this story before, was David Cutcliffe was my head coach at Ole Miss. He got fired. And when he got fired, my O-line coach called me in. He was like, hey, we want to see where you're projected. And I was like, well, man, I got another year left of school, but they had that junior committee at the time where they grade you and see, just give you good advice and make sure that you're making a good decision if you decide to leave early. I had I was coming back to Oxford, Mississippi. I love Oxford, Mississippi. I was having a ball, and I enjoyed the people. And so it was home for me and I didn't want to leave. And I'm in Vancouver, Canada. My wife is from there, so I'm up there meeting her family for the first time. Okay. And I get a phone call from the junior committee, and they say, hey, we're projecting you to be a late first round, early second round draft pick. And I was kind of like, oh, man, no idea. And then the next day I talked to Ed Orgeron, and I told him I was coming back to school because, new coach and all that. I'm like, what do you need for recruiting? So I wasn't thinking about, the next level even then. And then finally, got some wise people like, called me and had a couple conversations, and they were just like, this is a legit grade on you. So maybe you really want to think about this. And that's when I made a decision. And then I'm standing up there, finally get drafted. And I'm like, oh man, all right, this is a career now. So, and so it was never a thing on my mind because I wasn't raised that way to think about football, because we didn't watch a lot of football growing up because we were constantly working. It was every moment you got, you were working, doing something, whether it was, on the farm or doing mechanic work or pouring concrete or framing houses. I was helping my mom, with bills and things, and so I was working. So it wasn't a thing on my mind. It was more of like, oh, this is my way for my mom to not to have to pay for my school, and it's a way for me to get to meet people, so I have opportunity to get a job outside of the small town that I grew up in. So that was for me. So, but anyway, back to your story. We digress here. Back to your story.
It's very similar.
So now you're highly recruited. How did you I'm thinking about Notre Dame and thinking about the type of offenses that they run, type of school it is, very traditional. How did you choose Notre Dame, knowing that you had this skill set of being a mobile quarterback? Guy can get a spread offense, guy, can do it all. How did you choose Notre Dame out of all the other places that you could have went?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the goal for me was always the best education possible. Like I actually had this dream. I told my college counselor this, that, I wanted Alabama, I wanted, Ohio State, I wanted Michigan, I wanted to have that hat, opportunity where you choose your school. Yeah. And I wanted to choose an Ivy League school instead of one of those, just to make a statement that hey, I was doing this for the best education. And while that all sounded good in theory as a freshman in college or in high school, the long story short is as a quarterback at the time, most quarterbacks make their decision going into their junior year. And most teams only take one quarterback in every class. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a different timeline on, making your decision. So I got put in a position where earlier in my recruiting process, I had, Michigan State, North Carolina, Duke, Syracuse, Northwestern, kind of like what I would consider at the time, kind of these like tier B, playing in great conferences. Maybe they can be, have breakout years, but typically like kind of that second tier of every conference. So I was making a decision between those schools and really loved Michigan State and Coach D'Antoni up there. So I was really wanting to go to Michigan State after spending some time up there close to home, playing in the Big Ten, felt like it was a real football school. But North Carolina had a better education. So I was back and forth between the two. A guy committed to Michigan State. So now I'm really left with North Carolina. And the problem that I had with North Carolina was like Chapel Hill is going to be this great university. I love that they're wearing Jordan uniforms. Like it's going to be fun. But it's a basketball school. I hated the idea that I was about to go play football at a basketball school. So I'm actually, the day that I was going to call, like once again, in the football world at the time, and probably still is today, these quarterbacks start to choose their schools. And like, if you wait too long before you make your decision, somebody else commits to that school, right, like you get left with, whatever's left as the one spot that'll take you. So I'm talking to my dad about it. He could tell that I'm a little, off about it. And he's like, well, what school, would you think hits all the things that you want? And I'm like, there's really two schools out there that can do it. And I'm only really eligible to go to one of them. It's either Stanford or Notre Dame. And, they're doing academics at the highest level, and they actually have a chance to play for a national championship. That would be the way that I could actually, hit both of the things I'm trying to get done at the highest level. He's like, well, Stanford, I didn't, take my AP courses at the time. So to be able to get in Stanford, Notre Dame was the one that was left. He was like, just give him a call, see what happens. And literally the day I woke up that morning thinking I was committing to North Carolina. That night, I was calling Notre Dame. I get on the phone with Chuck Martin, who's Wait, what? You were calling them? Called them. So there was no offer on the table from them. No offer. No offer. There was actually they weren't going to take a quarterback in my class. They had Malik Zaire in the class above me. They had Gunnar Kiel as well, who's ended up at LSU, but then Cincinnati. So they had some great quarterbacks in front, and they were going to take a quarterback in my class. But I knew I was interested. They had come by the school. They had seen me. I was shaking hands. I knew I wanted to try there. So he was like, just give him a call and see what happens. You got nothing to lose. So I called Coach Martin, who was our area coach. He was offensive coordinator. He said, DeShone, you're lucky. We just got news that our starting quarterback, Everett Golson, is actually not going to be playing next season because of, some situation with academic dishonesty. So we're actually going to open up and potentially take a quarterback in his class. Are you available next Wednesday to throw? Wow. I said, yes, sir. I'll be ready to throw. So that following Wednesday, he comes out 7 a.m. before school. I get all my receivers to come out with me. My best friend in high school is a huge Notre Dame fan, so he's like super excited to come catch for me. And I have the best day I've ever had of throwing the football. I went out there and I was slinging it that day. And I was, had a little bit of swag to me, got confident towards the end, throwing the ball. It was a windy day actually, so I had the wind at my back. I was pushing the ball down the field a lot. I got an offer from Notre Dame the next day. From there, though, Alabama called. LSU called. Everyone started to hop on now, and that's kind of how recruiting goes, right? You get one of those big schools, and everyone doesn't want to miss out.
Yeah.
So then, being a couple more weeks, I was actually going to choose between Alabama, LSU, Notre Dame. As you know, I was thinking about academics first, but then secondly, in order for us to go visit Alabama and LSU, and I loved LSU. I love Cam Cameron. I love Les Miles. That was some of my favorite recruiting visits I ever had. I knew that they were due for a national championship. They had this guy Leonard Fournette who was going there. I'm like, oh, we can go be great. But there was two elements. There was the academic side where I knew I wanted to if I didn't make it to the league, if I went to either of those schools, I didn't like the idea of potentially selling used cars down in Alabama or Louisiana or something like that.
Come on, man.
I'll call it what it is. Comparing to Notre Dame, that's how I felt at least. And then, the expense, we're going to, as for my whole family to go down there to see those schools, it's going to cost us $1,000 in flights. And that was $1,000 we didn't have. Yeah. Had a week set up for visits. Sunday, we're going to drive to Notre Dame. The following Thursday, Friday, we're going to fly down to Alabama, rent a car, drive to Baton Rouge, and then make a decision after that. Went to Notre Dame on a Sunday. It was like the most serene April, spring day in God country. The bells are ringing and the church bells. It's a Sunday, afternoon. I meet with Coach Kelly. We go around. We get back in the car. And before we got on Ohio Turnpike to drive 2 hours back, I was like, I'm going to Notre Dame. I called Coach Miles and Coach Saban, made my commitment with Notre Dame, didn't even make the trips that following week, and, the rest is history.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, the question for you, now we're in this era of NIL.
Different.
Would you have made that same decision?
It's a great question.
Knowing the money that's flowing around now, would you've said, hey, no, would you've kept those same values of education, then ball, with that kind of pressure, with the thought of your parents, your family came for $1,000 flights to go down here to watch you play?
Look, I think it's a great question. I've had these conversations.
It's hindsight.
Yeah, it's different these days. Like I feel like I was the part of like the last generation. Like we were the people who they cracked down so much on being able to get the envelope under the door that like we couldn't get anything at that little gap before the NIL stuff started to happen. I think that honestly, with the values and the lessons that my parents are bringing me, I think going to Notre Dame first, probably I would have landed at Notre Dame. Yeah. The question is whether or not I would have stayed. Going in and having a rough freshman year, getting told I should probably play tight end, getting the yips. I couldn't throw the ball. I was trying to put on weight. The idea that I'll call it what it is, the way the portal is set up right now alongside NIL, you don't get money to stay. You get money to leave. Right. So getting to Notre Dame first and attempting that path, and definitely I think we probably would have landed there as a family in that decision. But staying at Notre Dame, I'm not sure. Like every year I think it would have been a different situation. My freshman year probably would have been tough to stay unless I would have went and tried to play baseball there. After my sophomore year and, having a run at the Heisman and going to the Fiesta Bowl and having my breakout year playing on one of the best, college football teams that I've ever seen, that would have been obviously easier to stay going into the following year. Now, the question is after my 4-8 junior year, whether would I went to the league or would I have stayed on an NIL deal to go back? And I probably would have stayed because the only point of going to the league was to, change my family's life.
Well, let's look at this from a different perspective. You don't know if you would have stayed, but by staying, what did that do for you?
Yeah, it helped a lot.
But not having this, not having the out to be able to leave, because again, if you left back then, you would have to sit out. Yeah. And then you left back then, it wasn't because you were leaving for money. Right. Now you're sitting in a position where you really have to. I got to look within. Yep. What did that do for you? Your self-esteem. What does it do for your mindset? In the character building that you receive by going through those hardships.
Yeah, I think some of the most important conversations that I have that have shaped my life happen, late night, Notre Dame at the dorm with a bunch of, non-football players. So I think it shaped everything of who I am right now. From studying finance at the College of Mendoza, the time we're the #1 business school in the country. The guys that I was competing with and the guys who are in class with me are some of the brightest guys I've ever been around. So learning the difference between corporate finance and investment banking. Then from there, these different treks that you go down, whether if you're an accountant and you're trying to make it to one of the big, accounting firms, if you're in investment banking, here's the top banks that are out there. From there, you do a couple years, and work, 80 to 90 hour, weeks. And then from there, you try to get into private equity. Maybe you have to go back and get your business school. Like all of the framework of what I now love as business, the thing that gets me up every morning, all happened from these, late night conversations with these guys who were just casually living across the hall from me in the dorm. So I think that staying around there and keeping, what was happening off the field as the reason why I was at the school, once again, shaped what I am today. And I think put me on a better path towards a much, more fruitful future. But then also it was what allowed me, I think, to excel on the field as well, because I was challenged in different directions.
Right.
And what then made playing football, a little less pressure. I was thinking more about what my internship was going to be and whether or not I'd be able to get into Goldman Sachs so I can go do 2 years of investment banking to have the best resume possible. So when it came down to actually going out and playing, I was just playing free, and maybe I'd have played at a higher level if I was thinking, hey, this is my only way out. But to me, I was playing for the love of the game at the time versus for, an opportunity to pay the bills.
So it forced you to think long-term.
Exactly.
Versus short-term, which I think that's where we are right now. And I think these conversations are very important for young athletes and parents to hear that the long-term goal has to be thought about, and the short term can be great for now, but when you play 10 years in the NFL, a good bit of guys do, you're still retiring at 33, 34 years old, which then now that short-term thing that you've taken has now hampered this long-term, because you still got a long time to live. Absolutely. After you play 10 years in NFL. And so having that mindset and having that growth period in your life, did that then start to that transition into the sport in a way that, hey, if I'm not having this pressure to think about football as my end all to be all, and now I can take this exit, I have an off ramp. I've built an off ramp. At what point do I take that off ramp? Or is football still this love of my life that I still have to go and pursue? Because I think people get in a mindset that you have to only think about one or the other, and you can't do both. And so, being that you were able to take a step back and see it from that perspective, how did that then shape, moving forward, getting prepared for the NFL?
Yeah, I think that twofold. One, to me, the NFL was an off-ramp. It wasn't, rather than business being an off-ramp saying, hey, I got a backup plan to do business, the path was business. The path was, I got an internship at GE Capital. I was going to use that to build a nice resume. And once again, I was on a path towards either investment banking or hopefully skipping the line and trying to get to a VC or private equity on the finance side. For me, it felt like I was veering off of that path after a successful season my sophomore year, saying, oh, wait, there's actually a faster way to get there. But the plan was always the same. The direction I was heading in, for me, was always the same kind of North Star. My best friend from college and my co-founder of my business today, those discussions that we're having late night about business, like it was always about, hey, by 30, what do we want to do? And the goal was that, either we've exited a business or, we have a successful business. We can think about investing in other businesses and, kind of changing the world through, some sort of a business. So for me, the path was that the fastest way to get there and the way to make the most money was, once again, this investment banking track. 2 years at an investment bank, see if you can skip the line into a VC or private equity as a senior associate from there. If you don't skip the line, go back and get your MBA. That'll help you skip the line on the other side of that. And then all of a sudden, to me, the off ramp that presented itself was like, all right, you go out there, sophomore year, I'm a redshirt freshman, starting quarterback goes down. I throw a game-winning touchdown against Virginia, come out, start that next game, have a great game, and now we start to stack up these wins. We're a top 5, top 10 team in the country playing against Clemson, on college game day. And then, now you start to think about the NFL, in which the same North Star was still sitting in front of me. I still want to start a business and change the world through business, but maybe the path or the fastest path to get there isn't through a bank and a private equity fund, but maybe it's through going out and having a great NFL career, building myself a big network,
right?
Really, acquiring myself some startup money so I can go out and build a business one day, and then and still kind of land there. So the North Star was always the same, but just happened to take a different path to get there.
Yeah,
but it was also a hurdle. It was also tough for me though, because what I think that, and I've been a little, vocal about this more recently, is that I think that the challenges that I had then, like, I'm sure that's kind of the next step in the story of football, is that, I get there and go on 16 as the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, day one starter there as a rookie.
And you're going into a place that is rebuilding and is going through a lot of different quarterbacks. And so, I'm good. Let's go there, because that's exactly where I wanted to
go. Cool. Yeah. So you go from there, and then you go to Green Bay. And Mike McCarthy gets fired there. You go to Oakland. We move to Vegas. Gruden gets fired there. You go to Tennessee. At the end of a Vrabel run. So through that process, I think that what was difficult for me was that since I had the North Star that I had, it was always toying in my mind on like, where should my mentality be today? I get to Cleveland. You get drafted. You get a signing bonus, you see an opportunity to start as a rookie. And the first thing that I think to myself as, I leave my draft party, I wake up the next morning, I'm sitting in the car that picks me up to drive 2 hours down the road to Cleveland. And all I'm thinking to myself is, it's time to be all ball, no more of that sports stuff, or no more of that business stuff.
Right.
Talk to my best friend, Pat, once again, my current co-founder of my business. Hey man, I know that I said we're going to do this together, but I got to go do this football thing and just be all in football.
Right.
So now I remove a big element of my life, which is like exploring business and thinking about new ideas and innovating and changing the world. And I'm just going to focus in on ball. So that was a hole that Cleveland, kind of lives in forever. For me, it was like this ongoing battle of like, how deep do I need to get into ball for it to finally work? Show up, team meetings at 7 a.m. First, week 1 of the season, I'm showing up at about, 6:15, watching about 30 minutes of film,
right.
A little more film than everybody else will watch, to make sure I was ready to go for the meeting. Now we're, going into kind of the second quarter of the season. We're 0-4, 0-5. Okay, now I'm going to start showing up at 5:30. Now I'm going to, get a little more film in. Then all of a sudden, we get to 0-8, 0-9, and now my quarterback coach is meeting me there at the facility at 5 in the morning, 4:50 in the morning, to throw every throw for practice that day off the script.
Wow.
And then watch the film before. So I just kept digging deeper and trying to give more and give more and give more and give more. And unfortunately, if you look at that season, I think while there was, definitely some ups and downs, I think that I became a little more inconsistent the deeper I went down the rabbit hole. And what I've learned now, looking back, hindsight 2020, was, everybody has a different way of playing their best ball. Everybody has a different way of triggering their flow state. For me, my flow state has come as I look back on my sports career when I'm challenged the most off the field, where I can actually go out and, think bigger.
Wow.
And, have those discussions that I was having in college, play baseball. I'm thinking about these offers that I'm getting in football while I'm playing baseball, and I'll go out and, go 4 for 4 in baseball because I had, LSU show up at the same time as Alabama. So I'm thinking about something else, and then I just go play the game, and I'm, able to relax in the game and get in the flow state. So that's kind of, as I look back on that time, I just wish that, the time is fine. You can work as hard as you need to work. You got to do what you got to do to be able to have the information to play the game. But I just wish I would have, continued to just be me, which is a multifaceted guy who cared about a lot of things, cared a lot about football, loved the strategy of football, loved nothing more than getting ready for an opponent, going into the next week. And that element of the game is like my favorite part of the game. So like double down on that. But then, when you have that hour and a half to 2 hours a day when you get back home, there's no reason to flood yourself with more and more and more. Right. Now it's time to expand and think about other things. And that's what you see that a lot of these, greats, and I'm sure you have your elements, is that some people like video games, some people like golf, some people like to hunt.
I like hunting and cigars.
There you go. Go find the thing that that keeps you. Right. So that when you get out and play, you feel like you're your full self. To me, I found myself ignoring the things that made me to try to be this all ball all the time guy, which it might have worked for Tom Brady, it might have worked for Brett Favre, it might have worked for Rich Gannon, the guys that I was kind of looking up to at the time. But for me, that wasn't me. And once again, it triggers a flow state are different for everybody. I now know that I'm in my best flow state when I'm being pushed dynamically across a couple different things while keeping the main thing.
Man, that's so impactful. It's so impactful because, you go through life thinking you think about, what was the kid name who played at Tennessee, Rhodes Scholar. It's like, oh, you can't think about, we can't draft a kid like this because he's thinking about other than ball. And to hear you say that the thing that you wish you would have done more was kept your focus on some other things outside of ball so that you didn't get too wrapped in, too intertwined in it where you didn't play tight. You have a lot of pressure on your plate coming in to Cleveland with a rebuild in place. And now you're the starting quarterback and now 0-4, 0-8, and so nothing is changing from the years before in Cleveland. So I'm sure listening to all of that you felt like it's my duty, my job to do more, to keep showing up for my team and ignoring the piece that kept you free. Yep. And, I'm sitting here just thinking about the times when I was in my flow and when I was, at my best. It was always at times when I was thinking about something else outside of football. Mm. But because I always wanted to make sure I took care of my family, I always went back into that hole. Whether it was a torn Achilles or 3 shoulder surgeries, I got to get up every day, rehab. There was no off time in off season. Most people were taking time off. I was there, rebuilding my body. This is what I have to do. And the moments that I was in that flow was I maybe just taking a trip back home and I was out on the phone with my granddad hanging out. Yep. And then I go back and I'm like, some of the best games I played with having those type of interaction, those breakups from ball. So it's good. I think it's important for people to hear and help young kids to figure out what is that. Again, you don't take away from the main thing. You just use your brain in a different way that you don't get dug down into a deep hole.
Yeah, I think that the synergies and the stories that we kind of aligned with earlier, those once again, there's an asterisk on this. Everyone's different.
Everybody.
I've been around the St. Brown family for the last probably 8 years of my life. Equinemius is one of my best friends from Notre Dame, and Amon-Ra now is having the career that he's having. Those guys are dogs, right, and they are all ball, and that's so they're not thinking about business or thinking about things outside of it. They care about from day one. John Brown is the most aggressive. My kids are going to be the best dad ever, and they got there that way. So there is room for that all day long, and that's just not the lesson that I'm looking to talk about today. Yeah. But I think the things that we aligned on here is that we found success almost secondhand to being on a mission towards something else. Right. And I think that some of the messages that parents are sharing today is that you need to hyper focus and you need to have training all the time. And you got these 8th grade, quote unquote, phenoms that are doing all these passing academies and they're looking for deals and thinking about managers and all this stuff. And it's no, all of those people that I was around, I can name dozens and dozens of them that thought that they were going to be the guy. Not one of those guys were the guys. Right. The guys who made it were guys who fell into it because, through the lessons of going down a path that was separate than sports, they were able to apply those lessons to sports in a way that I believe, sticks longer. It's experiences that you can actually apply. But if you just get told the same thing over and over again, and you go out there and you try to do this training technique over and over and over again because you just are, so focused on the item that when it comes time to actually, once again, get in the flow state and just play, like now you're thinking about like which move should I do,
Right.
at the line, or like which step should I take? Where, the game is built, specifically football is a game that we got these quick spurts, and like you can't be thinking about anything other than you just got to play.
Reaction.
You just got to react.
You got to have reactions in this game. I mean, I think the purpose of all this is to show that there's also different ways, and it's not to say one way is the right way or the wrong way. It's just you got to think about it for yourself, what works for you. And hearing other people that have gone down this path and have these type of journeys, it gives you a lens of say, okay, I got a cool menu that I can like pick from and think about to see where my game goes, see where my life goes, see where my state of flow, how that really shows up for me as a person. Because at the end of the day, this game's going to end.
Absolutely.
It's going to end. And if you don't have that kind of mindset of trying to figure out you, I mean, again, a lot of work that we do within my company, Team Intelligence, is to help you understand you. Because once you understand you, then you know how to have your skills transition to different environments, and you also have confidence in who you are as you're making those transitions. And so, this is great, fantastic. So this is actually a good little segue here that we like to do this 2-minute. This is a couple more rapid fire. I've kind of warmed you up early today with this, but we're going to even take it a little bit softer on it. So, your the most clutch snack for you before game.
You said stack?
Snack.
Oh, snack. Apples and peanut butter. I don't know why. Quick energy.
All right. One artist on your playlist that you grind out to.
Future.
All right. What teammate has the worst fashion sense that you've ever played with?
Nick Wisher, tight end at Notre Dame. He was the king of
khakis and Dockers?
No, sweatpants and button-down tees. I don't know how that ever goes together.
Oh, man. All right. Last one. One thing about Notre Dame that people get totally wrong.
It's not a football school. The fans love it. The students are there because they're there for education. You're not going to Notre Dame and thinking that you're gonna leave the stadium after a big win and there's gonna be a couch burning and a bunch of parties for you to go and enjoy, and you're gonna be walking around as a man. No, you're gonna leave that stadium. It's gonna be dead quiet. You're gonna have touchdown Jesus looking right at you, and you're gonna put on your issued gear. You're gonna walk back to your dorm and have a chill night and get back to the mission. Like, don't think you're going there because you're gonna be, I don't know, Last Dance U or Blue Mountain State or any of the things that you think that football is actually going to be.
I can see that, man. I actually got a chance to spend some time. Super, super impressed with Notre Dame. A couple years ago, went over, hung out there with Marcus, one of my good friends that was at Ole Miss there, Katie. Was able to bring me up there and give me a tour and and talking about some of the stuff we're doing with my company. But it was a very impressive place, and I can definitely see it was like it's about that business, about that business, And so, all right, perfect. Now that you've had some hardships, you've gone through some ups and downs, as a starting quarterback, and you've gone on and played in Green Bay, played with Tennessee. What are some of those? Who are some of those people? And again, I asked you this one question earlier, and you mentioned Aaron Rodgers. So actually, let's just go with Aaron Rodgers. Like, what kind of lessons did you learn of how to be a quarterback and then also to be multifaceted, as you call Aaron, early on in the ways, like, again, you were already thinking about how you can be multifaceted, but how did Aaron really show you that on your journey as a young quarterback coming in and having those highs and lows as a guy who was brought in to be a franchise changer?
Yeah, I think that I was leaving the Browns and had no idea of which thing that I did was the right thing and which things that I did were the wrong things when I was with the Browns. Who should I have trusted? The coach, the GM, my agent, my trainers. Like I went 0-16. I know there's something in there. I'm supposed to be good, but I don't know which way to go. So getting back to or getting over to Green Bay and being able to finally take a step back and sit in a room and be around, a great Super Bowl MVP, one of the best throwers of the football, if not the best thrower of the football of all time.
Arm talent out of this world.
I got to sit back and listen and learn. And, I think that you're mentioning about, with team intelligence, about understanding yourself. I think that all the best I've ever been around, from Aaron to Joe Thomas to Devontae Adams, I've been around a lot of great ones. They're all the most self-aware people in the room. They know how they tick. They know what they like. They know exactly where they're at. They know when they're stressed. They know when they're not stressed. They know when they're eating well. They know when they are very self-aware. And I think that one thing I learned with Aaron is being behind Aaron is that, the way that champions think, the way that Tom thinks, the way that the people who are showing back up, and I'm assuming that's probably the way that Pat thinks. It's about if you're trying to win a Super Bowl, it's about being the best team in the playoffs. Yes. And then the very best team in the Super Bowl game. Yeah. So there's a up until that moment, there is a whole timeline of preparing for those moments that you need to make sure that you're peaking at the right time.
Right.
So, as I was getting behind, I got there in OTAs and was behind Aaron, a lot of his time spent in OTAs, come in, we did get a new coach one of the years, but come in, make sure the guys are there, be a good leader, work out, get a good workout in. But, during OTAs, it was about golf. It was about, new books. It was about movies. It was about history. It was about all of these other things that weren't ball. And once again, the guy who thought I needed to be, all ball all the time. Yeah. This is, we're sitting in these quarterback meetings and, spending out of an hour meeting, spending 20 minutes diving into the playbook and spending the other, 40 minutes diving into everything else. And I'm like, how is he supposed to be this legend? And he's all these other things. And what I learned is that, that intensity rose throughout the entire season. Once again, OTAs was about, exploring, thinking new, coming up with new concepts, getting up on a whiteboard, redrawing things out, going through some of these tough looks that Minnesota in our division was giving us, with 7-up pressures and having some great safeties. That's what OTAs are about. What training camp is about is making sure that the young guys who have to come in to the system that you had from last year, if you got the same coach and the same offense, is making sure that they intertwine well. Mm-hmm. The old guys, it's about making sure that they're just going to peak at the right time when the season starts. Get in the beginning of the season. It's about figuring out what works, 2-minute drill. What's the first play of every 2-minute drill? What's the second play of every 2-minute drill? What's our, what's our strategy around that? Game management, clock management. It's the self-awareness throughout the season, being around him and being once again a multifaceted guy, got me to realize that you can look at this path towards peaking at the right time in a lot of different ways. And in that is where I unlocked, the mentality of once again, I can think about more than just ball all the time. I thought it was just dig a deeper and deeper and deeper hole that's all football based throughout the entire year. And in doing that, the football gods would then, reward you with wins and reward you with stats. But it's no, it's about understanding that the game is a game and that you need to be peaking at the right time within that game. So, being behind him was one of the most transformational moments in my career, because I was able to once again see that you can be a lot of things to be great, and you can be very smart and be great. You can be very articulate and be great. The guy's a Jeopardy, legend. He's well read, So my time behind him was digging myself out of that Cleveland hole.
Is a sharp dude. I would say we do have another thing in common. You were behind Aaron.
Yep.
I was also behind Aaron. Never played with Aaron, but
really?
I was also behind Aaron because he was drafted 2 picks in front of me.
Oh, really? I love it. I love it.
Well, I mean, this is fascinating for me because what I'm sitting here thinking about as you talking about this process, I'm thinking about business.
Yep.
And now you have this foundation that you've got a chance to kind of take a step back and dig yourself out of this hole that you were in with Cleveland. And I want to take you now off the field. You're now that same mindset seemed like has followed you off the field, and you've made that transition. You become what I would assume self-aware of who you are and what your skill sets are, and you've back to the mission of building something. You want to build something. Take me through that process and what you're doing now, and why it's something that is you're still so passionate about doing.
Yeah. So for most. You get to the end of your career and you get left with this cliff in front of you of, do I continue to pack up my bags and bounce from, hotel to hotel to try out? Do I start thinking about life after? You try to get into that transition. For me, I knew I didn't want to be a guy who was going to, hang on for any longer than I needed to hang on.
Right.
Once again, I saw this as a plan towards something that was bigger than just the game. So my career allowed me, it was perfect. I ended up in Oakland, right before COVID. And that was kind of a big moment for me. Being in Oakland, being the third string quarterback behind Derek Carr and Mike Glennon for most of that season was an opportunity for me to get in shape to really try to, restart my career after leaving Green Bay and getting over there. But then also I decided to get myself an apartment right on the other side of the Bay Bridge to the Silicon Valley to San Francisco.
Man, yeah.
So I got to spend a lot of my off days and my free time bouncing over there, meeting with old Notre Dame friends, with venture capitalists, with people who are all kind of in that startup energy. After that season, COVID hits, lockdown hits. We don't know if we're going to have another season. We end up signing Marcus Mariota. I get released in connection to that. And now I'm sitting here as a free agent, not knowing if there's a season, after having, one of the best kind of get right years of my life of eating healthy, getting into great shape, but then also challenging myself mentally after spending some time with Aaron, unlocked that I need to go do more of that, and decided to think about, what life after ball could look like. And I knew I wanted to build something. So, long story short, had a experience I was signed with Jordan when I was in the league, had a bunch of, J's, saw how these limited edition releases were going out. This big storytelling was happening, and wanted to build a business that could help brands that could create these culturally relevant products, these culture capturing products, to help them stay connected to their customers, on the other side of the buy button. Essentially, the idea was that, these limited edition sneakers, by the time that someone actually wears those sneakers, that's way past the interaction with the brand.
Right.
Instead, someone stands in the line, they get their hands on a pair of J's, they sell them to the sneaker plug sells them to the local wholesaler either pushes them on StockX or pushes them through some sort of a sneaker shop in which half the J's are real, half the J's are fake.
Right, yeah.
Then you finally get the person who actually buys the product and puts them on because they love the story about Travis Scott and, the collaboration with Jordan, or, Kim Jones from Dior and the story that they told there. So there's a big gap between the data and understanding of the customer that Jordan had and who the actual customer was.
Right.
So that's what I kind of had double circle during my time, and wanted to try to build some technology that worked there. It's been a 5-year journey, helping a lot of brands.
Easy, huh?
Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of ups and downs for sure. But ultimately have landed on a product that we're really excited about that leverages some NFC RFID technology, place it on physical products. So art, collectibles, apparel, you name it, we can chip it. And then from there, the brand can create these digital experiences through the physical product. So you tap the product, you get a digital experience on the other side of that, that allows you to stay connected to the brand no matter where you got it.
Right.
Whether you bought it from their in-store, direct to consumer retail experience, or if you bought it on Amazon, or if you bought it in the secondary market, this product still can kind of, speak for itself when it comes to the digital brand storytelling, guaranteeing authenticity and, ongoing kind of engagement opportunities to the brand. So that's what I decided to do, to wrap that back into, that transition. It ended up being perfect for me because once again, I was in the Silicon Valley, COVID hits. I'm on, 3 teams in 3 years, getting ready to be in my 4th city because Oakland is getting ready to go over to Vegas.
Right.
And I had to, I started thinking about life after ball. I knew that this was a big idea. This is 2018, 2019. The resale market is booming. StockX has this big article that comes out saying they're a $3 billion business. The Real is, on route to go public. Like there's this whole world around these types of products. And I think there was an opportunity to disrupt it. So for me, it was just that transition became a lot easier because I was able to kind of, think about life after ball kind of apply it during a time where I could apply it being in COVID. And then, that next season, then as the season sparks back up, I end up on the Titans for the last, 8 weeks of the year as the quarantine quarterback. Perfect timing. Knew I'd love Tennessee. I was visiting Tennessee a bunch, so knew that was probably going to be my last stop. So try to put as much as I could in the ball, but more into thinking about life after ball. Raised a bunch of money, and it's been, a 5-year, journey of a lot of ups and downs, but now really feeling like we got, a foundation under ourselves. We have a great product that we can go out and sell. And now it's just about continuing to listen to the customers that we have and finding ways to bring more value. The chip can do a lot, but we also see the services around the chip as, a lot of big opportunities for us to continue to scale.
I'm sitting here because, I have an ERP system and I'm sitting here thinking about you can track this product now. This product, you can put all this product in, in bins or whatever it may be. And now you can track this product and wherever it goes. And so when it breaks chain of custody, where it is. I mean, there's a lot there, man. There's a lot there. So good for you, man. I'm excited for you, excited for watching this product. Man, again, I've been a part of the early on journey. So I know the struggle, especially as an entrepreneur, of, people don't get a chance to see all the hard work you put on this side of it. They see the success stories. And then they correlate those with, you was also a second round draft pick, and they think that has come easy. And so, but nothing is good if you just hand it to you. So the fact that you've stayed on this path and you've grown in it, it's been fun to watch, and I'm excited that you get to come here and share your story with us. Now, we're about to wrap this thing up, but I got a couple more questions for you. I like to ask these kind of questions on the tail end of things. What piece of advice will you give a parent now as they're trying to navigate these waters of, training, the type of training that they're doing? Is it mental? Is it physical? Or, hey, how do I manage these NIL deals? And so I know parents are listening and they want to know, like, there's anything that they can get that can help them navigate this space.
Yeah, when it comes to in season, let the coach. I think that's the biggest advice I can give. I think that in the off season, you can work with different trainers. You can, be as integrated as you want in the process. You can learn all about the game and make sure that you have as much knowledge as you can. And with that comes the NIL stuff. But when it comes to in season, let the coach. There's no need for meetings every, after a game that you don't feel good about. There's no need for reevaluating some of the conversations that you had back in June and in May during passing academy, where you thought that they were doing better than they are now. When the season comes on, you can make that decision before they go to college, or before they go to their high school, or before the season starts, if the coach is the right coach for your guy or for your son. But once the season starts, you gotta just let them play, because you'll see the ups and downs, you'll see the attitudes, you'll see the things that coaches don't like to see when you're starting to put those messages in a young man's head as he's trying to go out there and just win a game.
Right.
If you once again have something to say to the coach, say it before the season, say it after the season, but during the season, just let the coach.
Yeah, I like that. Last question for you, and it's in lieu of this is an Intangible podcast. Give me one or two intangibles that has made DeShone who he is today.
Communication skills.
Strong.
I'm a chameleon. I think that's something that's been always something special for me. As a quarterback, you got to get into a huddle. The further you go up in your career, the more that huddle is full of completely different personalities. And you've been right there at the center in the huddle as well, and obviously leading your guys up front. But you got to get in a huddle, and you got to be able to communicate to 10 other guys, all with 10 different backgrounds. This guy likes country music. This guy likes to hunt. This guy likes rap music. This guy needs to get hit in the chest to get him sparked up and going. This guy will slap you upside your head if you hit him in the chest. This guy needs to understand his formations, because he's still trying to get his formations because he just got traded here. Every one of those guys in front of you, as you're trying to, give them the play and get ready to go up there and try to complete that mission of that next down. are different people, and you got to know how to communicate to each one of them and be able to be a chameleon for the sake of getting the best out of them all as a quarterback. So if you think you're going to go in there and talk your talk and trust that everyone's just going to follow you, you'll get a percentage of the huddle who's with you, but majority of those guys aren't going to want to follow you.
Yeah. DeShone Kizer. Man, I really enjoyed this, and I'm excited for other people to hear your story and the things that have made you who you are. We definitely going to keep following you. I can't wait to scan some Jordans, get my son some shoes where I can scan in and see, this amazing product that you guys have built. I really appreciate you joining us on Intangible Podcast. It's been fun.
Appreciate you, Spence.
Yeah, absolutely.